Avoid contact with the hull. That single message from Mission Control kept replaying in my mind as I stared at the massive spacecraft hanging in its containment facility. The Archiver, humanity's most ambitious deep space mission, launched in 1924, had somehow returned. After 500 years, it had re-entered Earth's orbit last Tuesday and was now suspended before me in the heavily secured hangar at NASA's Johnson Space Center. I'm still not sure why they called me. I'm just a planetary geologist with the USGS, not some hotshot NASA engineer. But they said my expertise in extraterrestrial mineral composition was needed, and after what happened to my brother Miguel at the Valles Caldera excavation last year, I was desperate for any distraction. The ship itself was a marvel of ancient engineering, impossibly preserved despite its age. Its hull gleamed under the stark fluorescent lights, looking almost wet like freshly polished obsidian. No sign of meteor impacts or space debris, no visible damage whatsoever, and it was completely empty. Dr. Rahul Kapoor, the lead physicist who'd been examining the craft for the past 3 days, handed me a tablet displaying the ship's primitive log entries. The last communication was recorded approximately 3 months after launch, he explained, his voice tight with exhaustion. Just a routine status update, then nothing for 5 centuries. I scrolled through the data. The original mission had been straightforward: travel to Proxima Centauri, collect environmental data, and return. The crew consisted of 12 individuals, all trained specialists selected from the finest scientific minds of Renaissance Europe. When we opened it yesterday, we found this. Dr. Kapoor gestured to a pedestal nearby. A small leather-bound book sat under a protective glass case. The journal of Captain Alfonso Marquez, apparently. The weathered pages contained handwritten notes, surprisingly well preserved, but it was the final entry that had everyone spooked. The rules must be obeyed. May God have mercy on whoever finds this vessel. Following the entry was a numbered list written in a different hand, shaky, desperate strokes of the quill that had occasionally torn through the parchment. "What are these?" I asked. "We believe they're protocols developed by the crew during their mission," Dr. Kapoor replied. "My team calls them the rules." "For what?" His expression darkened. "For survival." The buzzing of my phone interrupted us. My supervisor texting to inform me that I'd been officially assigned to the Archiver investigation team. 6 weeks minimum. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, I noticed a smudge on the glass case housing the journal, dark with an oily sheen. Dr. Kapoor followed my gaze. "We've been finding those everywhere," he whispered. "They appear and disappear, like fingerprints." I looked up at the looming shape of the spacecraft, its surface reflecting the movement of technicians scurrying around its base. For just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something move across that perfect black hull, something on the inside, pressing outward. The briefing room smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. 8 of us sat around an oval table while Dr. Kapoor displayed images of the Archiver's interior on the wall screen. The ship's living quarters were immaculate, bunks made, equipment neatly stored. It looked like the crew had simply stepped out for a moment, expected to return any second. But they'd been gone for half a millennium. "I'm Thomas Fisher, NASA's historical technology specialist," said a lanky man with wire-rimmed glasses. "The preservation of the ship defies explanation. By all accounts, the materials should have degraded significantly." Dr. Jackson Wu, quantum physicist, nodded in agreement. "The molecular structure of the hull shows evidence of temporal inconsistency. It's as if parts of the ship have experienced different time frames." A sharp-featured man at the end of the table snorted. "Let's cut the bullshit. We all know what this is." His badge identified him as Robert Decker, Department of Defense. "Enlighten us," Dr. Kapoor replied coolly. "First contact," Decker said flatly. "The crew encountered something out there, and it came back with the ship." My mind flashed to Miguel, his face contorted in terror as they pulled him from that cave. The doctors had said it was just oxygen deprivation causing the hallucinations, but I'd seen the footage from his helmet cam, the way the shadows had moved against the laws of physics. I forced the memory away and focused on the journal being passed around the table. When it reached me, I carefully turned to the list that had been written after the captain's final entry. Rule 1. Do not touch the hull with bare skin. Rule 2. No reflective surfaces near the ship. Rule 3. Maintain constant noise above 30 decibels when inside. Rule 4. Never remain aboard between 3 a.m. and 4:13 a.m. Rule 5. If you hear whispers in your native language, respond only in another tongue. Rule 6. Count your steps when moving between compartments. If the number changes, exit immediately. Rule 7. If you see a crew member, verify their identity by asking about Amsterdam. The correct response is, "We never reached it." These read like superstitions, said Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the xenobiologist. Maybe, Fisher replied, or maybe they're based on empirical evidence the crew gathered through trial and error. What happened in Amsterdam? I asked. Decker tapped his tablet. Nothing. The mission never stopped there. That's what makes Rule 7 particularly interesting. Dr. Kapoor cleared his throat. We've instituted these protocols as precautionary measures. You'll all receive printed copies. Memorize them. You can't be serious, Dr. Tanaka protested. Dead serious, Decker interrupted, because we've already lost someone. The room fell silent. Dr. Kapoor's face tightened as he pulled up security footage from 2 nights ago. The grainy video showed a technician working alone inside the ship's command center. He reached out to adjust something on the control panel, his hand accidentally brushing against the wall. He flinched, examined his palm, then continued working. 30 minutes later, the same technician approached a colleague. The footage had no audio, but their interaction seemed normal. The first technician pointed toward the ship's exterior, and both men walked out of frame. Alan Rivera never left the facility that night, Decker said, but someone wearing his face did. My stomach churned. What do you mean? The real Rivera was found in a maintenance closet this morning, Dr. Kapoor said quietly. He's been dead for approximately 48 hours. Cause of death? Dr. Wu asked. Unknown. No visible trauma. His expression, however... Decker trailed off. What about it? I pressed. Terror, he said simply. Pure terror. And the imposter? Fisher asked. Disappeared after clearing security. We're still searching. I thought again of Miguel, of his final coherent words before they sedated him. It gets inside you through the cracks in your mind. Dr. Kapoor distributed plastic-covered copies of the rules to each of us. Your access badges have been programmed with automatic lockout between 2:45 and 4:20 a.m. No one enters the ship during that window, period. Our first priority is understanding what happened to the original crew, he continued. Mr. Vasquez, given your expertise in extraterrestrial mineral composition, I want you focusing on these residues we've found. He handed me a sealed specimen container holding what looked like black sand. This substance appears wherever the hull has been touched. It's inorganic, but contains complex carbon chains unlike anything we've catalogued. I'll get started right away, I said, studying the strange material. One last thing, Decker added as we prepared to leave. From this moment forward, you're all under quarantine. No outside communication, no leaving the facility without clearance. For how long? Dr. Tanaka demanded. Until we understand what we're dealing with, Decker replied, or until we're all dead. As the briefing dispersed, Dr. Kapoor caught my arm. There's something else. He handed me a small flash drive. Your brother's excavation files. The similarities are concerning. I stared at the tiny device, my chest tightening. How did you... Just review it, he said quietly. And Vasquez? Trust no one who doesn't follow the rules, no matter who they appear to be. The lab they assigned me was state-of-the-art, scanning electron microscopes, mass spectrometers, and equipment I'd only read about in journals. Under normal circumstances, I'd have been thrilled. Instead, I kept glancing at the ventilation ducts, imagining something seeping through them. I spread the black residue onto a slide and slid it under the microscope. At first glance, it resembled volcanic ash, but the structure was all wrong. crystalline formations arranged in non-repeating patterns that somehow felt deliberate. My phone buzzed. A text from my ex-husband, Tony. "You were right about Miguel. Call me." My stomach knotted. I'd spent the year since Miguel's death trying to convince everyone that what happened in that cave wasn't a simple accident, that my brother hadn't just lost his mind from oxygen deprivation. Now Tony was reaching out after months of silence, but I couldn't respond due to the quarantine. I focused back on the microscope, increasing the magnification. The structures were changing, rearranging themselves under observation. I blinked hard, certain I was mistaken. Fascinating, isn't it? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Dr. Wu stood in the doorway watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Jesus, you scared me," I muttered, trying to calm my racing heart. "Apologies." He approached, peering over my shoulder at the slide. "The material responds to electrical impulses. Even the minute current from your body affects it. You've been studying it too." He nodded. "Each department is examining different aspects. I'm particularly interested in its quantum properties." He pointed to what appeared to be microscopic pockets within the crystalline structures. "These vacuoles contain something. Space that isn't quite space." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "that parts of this material exist partially outside our dimensional framework." I fought to keep my expression neutral. "That's impossible." "So is a 500-year-old spaceship returning without a scratch." Wu straightened up. "Have you reviewed the files Dr. Kapoor gave you? About your brother?" My body tensed. "Not yet. You might want to prioritize that." He turned to leave, then paused. "The substance they found on his equipment, it matched what we're finding on the archiver, down to the molecular structure." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's not possible. Miguel was exploring a volcanic cave system. He never went near any spacecraft. "Perhaps the spacecraft wasn't the source," Wu suggested cryptically. "Perhaps it's just another victim." After Wu left, I locked the lab door and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of files, Miguel's research notes, medical reports, incident logs, and video files from his expedition. I scrolled through the index, stopping when I saw a folder labeled Restricted Post-Incident Interview. The video showed Miguel strapped to a hospital bed, his eyes wild and bloodshot. A calm voice off camera asked questions, while my brother alternated between manic laughter and terrified whispers. "Tell us again what you saw in the cave, Dr. Vasquez." Miguel strained against his restraints. "It wasn't a cave. It was a mouth." "A mouth belonging to what?" "Not what. Who?" Miguel's eyes fixed on something beyond the camera. "They're old. So old. They traveled between stars when Earth was still cooling." "The entities you encountered?" Miguel laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "Encountered? Number, they encountered us. Long ago. They've been waiting. Watching. What did they want from you?" My brother's expression suddenly cleared, becoming eerily calm. "Same thing they always want. A way in." "Could you elaborate?" "Rules," Miguel whispered. "There are rules. Keep moving. Don't look in reflections. Never touch the walls with bare skin." He began to sob. "I forgot to count my steps." I paused the video, my hands shaking. The rules. They were almost identical to those found in the captain's journal from the archiver. Before I could continue watching, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights pulsed in the hallway outside my lab. The PA system crackled to life. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel implement containment protocol immediately." Sector 7. That was where they kept the ship. I grabbed my copy of the rules and ran into the hallway, joining the flow of frantic researchers heading toward the emergency shelter. Dr. Tanaka appeared beside me, his lab coat singed at the edges. "What happened?" I shouted over the alarm. "Fisher," he panted. "He touched the hull, then started attacking people. claimed they weren't human anymore. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with Decker, who was coordinating security personnel via radio. "Get to the shelter," he ordered without preamble. "We've got 4 confirmed casualties and Fisher is still unaccounted for." "What about the black residue?" I asked urgently. "Did Fisher touch it?" Decker's eyes narrowed. "How did you know about that?" Fisher claimed he saw the substance moving before he lost it. A crash echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by shouting. Decker pushed us toward the shelter. "Go! Now!" We sprinted down the corridor, but as we passed the main laboratory, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. Through the glass door, I saw Dr. Kapoor waving frantically. "In here, quickly!" Tanaka hesitated. "The shelter! There's no time!" Kapoor insisted, holding the door open. "Fisher cut the emergency power. The shelters won't seal." I made a split-second decision and darted inside, Tanaka reluctantly following. Kapoor immediately locked the door behind us and pulled the metal security shutters down over the windows. "Where's Wu?" I asked, noticing his absence. "Missing," Kapoor replied grimly. "Along with 3 others." He gestured to a bank of security monitors showing different areas of the facility. On one screen, Fisher was stalking through the cafeteria, his movements unnaturally fluid. Black stains covered his hands and spread up his forearms like veins. "Jesus," Tanaka whispered. "What's happening to him?" "It's not just happening to him," Kapoor said, pointing to another monitor. "Look." The screen showed the archiver in its hangar. The once smooth black hull now rippled like liquid, tendrils of darkness stretching out from its surface toward the surrounding equipment. "It's waking up," I murmured, remembering Miguel's words. "It's looking for a way in." "What are you talking about?" Tanaka demanded. I pulled out my copy of the rules, hands trembling. "My brother found something a year ago in the Vales caldera. Something old. He left rules too, almost identical to these. Whatever the archiver encountered out there, I think it's the same thing that killed Miguel." Kapoor nodded grimly. "The ship returned because someone called it back." Outside, the alarm abruptly cut off, leaving an eerie silence. On the monitor, Fisher stopped moving, his head tilting as if listening. Then, slowly, he turned to face the camera, his eyes now glossy black pools reflecting nothing. "Amsterdam," he said, his voice distorted through the speakers. "We've been waiting for you there." Then he smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished obsidian. The lights flickered, and the security monitors went dark. Kapoor immediately pulled out a hand-crank emergency radio and began turning the handle rhythmically. "Rule 3, he explained, noting my confused expression. "Constant noise above 30 decibels." The static from the radio filled the silence. Something about that white noise was comforting, like it was filling spaces where something else might seep in. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Tanaka said, pacing nervously. "Vasquez, tell us everything about your brother's incident." I took a deep breath. Miguel was leading a geological survey in a newly discovered cave system beneath the Valles caldera in New Mexico. His team found unusual mineral formations, black crystalline structures that weren't on any geological record. "Like the residue on the ship," Kapoor nodded. "Exactly. 3 days into the expedition, 2 team members went missing. Miguel and the others went searching and..." I paused, the memory still raw. Only Miguel came out. He was raving, covered in that black substance. Everyone assumed he'd had a psychotic break, that maybe volcanic gases had caused hallucinations. They found the other team members' bodies later, no visible injuries, just expressions of terror, Kapoor finished, like Rivera. "What did this ship find out there?" Tanaka whispered. "What could possibly survive in deep space for 500 years? "Maybe it doesn't experience time the way we do," I suggested, remembering Dr. Wu's comments about dimensional frameworks. A sharp thud against the laboratory door made us all jump, then another, methodical like knocking. "Don't answer it," I warned, remembering Rule 5. "If you hear whispers in your native language, respond only in another tongue." The knocking continued, followed by a voice, Dr. Wu's voice. "Kapoor? Vasquez?" Are you in there? I'm hurt. Please, let me in. Tanaka moved toward the door, but I grabbed his arm. Wait, Rule 7, we need to verify. Woo! Kapoor called out. What about Amsterdam? There was a long pause before Woo's voice responded. Amsterdam was beautiful this time of year. Wrong answer. Kapoor and I exchanged alarmed glances. Tanaka looked confused. What's wrong? The correct response is, we never reached it, I whispered. That's not Woo. The knocking suddenly became more violent, the door shuddering under impact. Metal began to dent inward. We need to move, Kapoor said urgently, pointing to a maintenance access panel in the corner. That leads to the service tunnels. They run throughout the facility. I helped Kapoor pry open the panel while Tanaka grabbed a bag of equipment. The pounding at the door grew more frenzied, accompanied now by a sound like wet metal being twisted. Go! Kapoor urged, pushing me through the opening. Tanaka followed, then Kapoor, who pulled the panel shut behind us, just as we heard the laboratory door give way with a screech of tearing metal. The service tunnel was narrow and dimly lit by emergency lights. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls, occasionally dripping condensation that echoed with metallic pings. I'll lead, Kapoor whispered, taking out a small flashlight. Count your steps between junctions. Remember Rule 6. We moved slowly through the cramped space. I counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3, focusing on the numbers to keep panic at bay. When we reached the first junction, I had counted 27 steps. Which way? Tanaka asked. Kapoor consulted a schematic on his tablet. Left. This should lead us to the backup generator room. If we can restore power to the secure communications array, we can call for extraction. We turned left and I began counting again. 1, 2, 3. Do we know what happened to the original crew? I asked, trying to distract myself from the claustrophobic tunnel. There must be more records from the ship's logs. The final entries are disturbing, Kapoor admitted. From what we can piece together, about 6 months into their journey, they discovered an object floating in deep space. Not a planet or asteroid, something artificial. Another ship? Tanaka asked. They described it as a temple of black glass, Kapoor said. Against orders, they brought a fragment aboard for study. After that, things deteriorated. Crew members reported seeing impossible things in reflections, hearing voices in empty rooms. The journal entries get increasingly paranoid, he continued. They began developing rituals, rules, to protect themselves. When they finally decided to jettison the fragment, it was too late. Something had already transferred to their ship. The last coherent entry simply stated they were returning home with their discovery. 26, 27, 28. I frowned, stopping abruptly. This corridor is longer than the first. Kapoor and Tanaka halted. How many steps? Kapoor asked tensely. I'm at 28. The previous junction was 27. Maybe you miscounted, Tanaka suggested. I shook my head. No, A distant scraping sound echoed through the tunnel behind us. Something was in there with us, moving along the metal walls. Rule 6, Kapoor said urgently. If the number of steps changes, exit immediately. We quickened our pace, searching desperately for another exit point. The scraping grew louder, accompanied by a wet, slithering noise that made my skin crawl. 34, 35. The tunnel should have ended by now. There! Tanaka pointed to an access hatch above us. Kapoor boosted me up and I struggled with the rusted wheel lock. Behind us, the slithering sounds grew closer. The emergency lights began to flicker, casting wild shadows that seemed to move independently of any source. With a screech, the wheel finally turned and the hatch swung open. I pulled myself up and reached back to help Tanaka. As Kapoor climbed up last, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the tunnel. A sinuous darkness that flowed like liquid mercury, but with edges that seemed to cut through the very fabric of reality. We slammed the hatch shut and spun the lock. Looking around, I realized we were in the server room for the facility's main computer systems. Rows of humming equipment surrounded us, still operational on backup power. "Where's the radio?" I asked, noticing Kapoor's empty hands. His face paled. "I must have dropped it in the tunnel." "Shit," Tanaka muttered. "Rule 3. As if on cue, the humming of the servers began to change pitch, dropping lower until it nearly stopped. The air grew thick, making it difficult to breathe. "Quick, make noise," I urged, grabbing a metal cabinet door and banging it repeatedly. Kapoor and Tanaka joined in, Tanaka using his keycard to strike against a metal railing, while Kapoor shouted numbers at the top of his lungs. The server hum gradually returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling receded. "We need to keep moving," Kapoor said. "The generator room should be 2 levels down." "Wait," I said, noticing one of the active computer terminals. "Maybe we can access the security system from here. See what's happening in the rest of the facility." Kapoor nodded, and I sat at the terminal typing rapidly. The system prompted for a security clearance I didn't have. "Try this," Tanaka suggested, handing me his ID badge. To my surprise, it worked, granting us access to the facility's monitoring systems. What we saw made my blood freeze. The hangar containing the archiver was now completely dark, except for the ship itself, which seemed to glow with an inner light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Around it, figures moved. Some I recognized as facility personnel, others twisted into shapes that defied anatomy. They appeared to be worshipping it. "My God," Tanaka whispered. "What are they doing?" I switched to other camera feeds. The cafeteria, laboratories, living quarters all showed similar scenes of transformation. Some people lay motionless on the floor, while others had been changed. Their bodies elongated, joints bent at impossible angles, skin sheened with that same black, oily substance. "We need to see inside the ship," I said, fingers flying over the keyboard. "There has to be interior camera footage." After several attempts, I managed to access the files from the initial exploration team. The footage showed the empty crew quarters, the pristine control room, and finally, the cargo hold. "Stop," Kapoor said suddenly. "Go back." I reversed the footage to the cargo hold view. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it a jagged black fragment about the size of a football. It looked like a piece of the Temple of Black Glass described in the logs. "That wasn't in any of the reports," Kapoor said, his voice shaking. The footage continued, showing a technician approaching the fragment, studying it with obvious fascination. He reached out, his fingertips nearly touching its surface. The video feed abruptly cut to static. "That's Rodriguez," Tanaka said, "the first one to board after we secured the ship." "And the first one to change," Kapoor added grimly. I stared at the static, remembering Miguel's words. "They're old. So old. They traveled between stars when Earth was still cooling." The crew didn't discover something in deep space, I realized, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. Something discovered them, and it's been using the ship to travel, to find new places, new hosts. "If that's true," Tanaka said, "why wait 500 years to return to Earth?" "Because it wasn't finished out there," Kapoor replied quietly. "It was collecting, learning, and now it's ready for a planet full of hosts." A timer on the computer caught my attention. 2:47 a.m. Rule 4. Never remain aboard between 3 a.m. and 4:13 a.m. "We have less than 15 minutes to find that generator and call for help," I said, rising from the terminal. As if in response, the lights went out completely, plunging us into darkness pierced only by the glow of the computer screen. In that dim light, I saw something black and viscous begin to seep through the ventilation grate above us, and it was reaching toward Tanaka's reflection in the screen. "Tanaka, don't look at the screen!" I lunged forward, knocking him sideways just as the black substance stretched toward his reflection. We tumbled to the floor while Kapoor frantically sang what sounded like an old Bollywood song, filling the room with noise. "Rule 2, he gasped between verses. "No reflective surfaces near the ship." "But we're not near the ship," Tanaka protested, scrambling to his feet. "I don't think that matters anymore," I said, watching the oily substance retract back into the vent when it couldn't reach Tanaka's reflection. "It's spreading throughout the facility," The rules apply everywhere now. The emergency lights flickered back on, casting weak red illumination across the server room. I checked my watch. 2:52 a.m., 8 minutes until the forbidden time window. We need to find shelter before 3 a.m., I urged. According to Rule 4, we can't be here between 3 o'clock and 4:13. The Secure Communications Center has a panic room, Kapoor said. It's designed to withstand almost anything. 1 level down, east wing. We moved to the server room door, pressing our ears against it before slowly opening it. The corridor beyond was eerily silent, lit only by the same red emergency lights that cast everything in a bloody glow. "Stay together," Kapoor whispered, "and remember to count your steps." We moved as quietly as possible while still making enough noise to satisfy Rule 3. Kapoor continued humming, Tanaka jingled his keys, and I whispered numbers as I counted our steps. The corridor stretched ahead, occasional doors marked with various department labels. As we passed the biochemistry lab, a muffled thump came from inside, followed by scratching against the door. We quickened our pace. 23 steps brought us to a stairwell. The door was marked with a black handprint that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. I paused, remembering Rule 1. Do not touch the hull with bare skin. "Does that apply to contaminated surfaces too?" I asked. "I wouldn't risk it," Kapoor replied, using his tablet to push the door open. The stairwell was dark, our flashlights cutting weak beams through heavy shadow. As we descended, I noticed something odd about the steps. They were uneven, some narrower than others, forcing us to watch our footing carefully. "These aren't regulation stairs," Tanaka muttered. "The dimensions are all wrong." "The building is changing," Kapoor replied grimly, "just like the tunnels." We reached the landing for the level below, but the door was missing. Instead, the wall was smooth, unmarked concrete. "That's impossible," Tanaka said, running his hands over the surface. "There should be a door here." "Count the steps back up," I suggested, a knot forming in my stomach. We turned and climbed back to the previous landing. 7 steps. "How many did we come down?" Kapoor asked. 12, I replied, the implications sinking in. The architecture itself was becoming unstable, warping according to some alien logic. My watch beeped softly. 2:57 a.m. "We're running out of time," I warned. Kapoor pointed his flashlight further down the stairwell. "Let's try the next level." We continued down, counting carefully. 13 steps this time, though the distance looked shorter. The door to the next level was there, but something dark and viscous seeped from beneath it, spreading across the landing. "That's not an option," I said, backing up. "Let's go back up and find another way." As we turned, a noise echoed from above, wet footsteps descending toward us, multiple sets. "They found us," Tanaka whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Trapped between the encroaching black substance below and whatever was coming from above, we huddled on the landing. Kapoor frantically checked his tablet. "The schematics show a maintenance shaft that runs parallel to this stairwell," he said, tapping on the screen. "It should be right. Here." He pointed to the wall beside us. I ran my hands along the concrete, feeling for any seams or panels. Nothing. "There's nothing here," I said desperately, checking my watch again. 2:59 a.m. The footsteps from above grew louder. A soft, discordant humming accompanied them now. Multiple voices that shouldn't have been able to harmonize but somehow did, creating a sound that made my teeth ache. Something cold brushed against my leg. The black substance from below was creeping up the landing, reaching toward us with tendrils that moved with deliberate intelligence. 1 minute, I warned, backing against the wall. In desperation, Tanaka threw his weight against the concrete where the maintenance shaft should have been. To our shock, the wall gave way, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "Go!" Kapoor urged, pushing me through first. The opening was barely wide enough for us to squeeze through one at a time. Tanaka followed, then Kapoor, who had to abandon his tablet when it wouldn't fit. The passage was pitch black and cramped, forcing us to move in a hunched position. I led the way, feeling along the rough walls, counting steps under my breath. Behind us, I heard scratching at the opening we'd come through. then a wet, slithering sound that suggested something was trying to follow. "Keep moving," Kapoor urged from behind me. "Just a little further." My watch beeped again. 3 a.m. exactly. We were now in the forbidden time window. As if in response, the air in the passage changed, becoming thick and syrupy. Each breath required effort, like inhaling through wet cloth. The darkness seemed to deepen, becoming almost tangible. "Anyone else feel that?" Tanaka whispered. Before we could answer, a sound reached us, soft at first, then growing clearer. Whispers, speaking in Spanish, my native language. The words were muffled but sounded urgently familiar. "Miguel," I gasped, recognizing my brother's voice. "Rule 5, Kapoor hissed. "If you hear whispers in your native language, respond only in another tongue." I forced myself to recall the German I'd studied in college. "Wir müssen weitergehen," I said shakily. "We must keep going." The whispers paused, then returned in English. "Help me, brother. I'm trapped here. They've kept pieces of me." My heart twisted. It sounded exactly like Miguel. The same inflections, the same slight accent when speaking English. But it couldn't be him. Miguel was dead. "Ich kann dich nicht hören," I responded, my voice breaking. "I can't hear you." The whispers grew angry, the voice distorting into something inhuman. The walls around us seemed to flex, constricting the already narrow passage. "Keep moving," Kapoor urged, his voice tight with strain. "And make noise." Tanaka began reciting what sounded like biochemical formulas, while Kapoor resumed his Bollywood song. I forced myself to count loudly, no longer caring about stealth. After what felt like an eternity, my outstretched hands met a metal surface. Another door. Unlike the concrete wall, this one had a conventional push bar. I hesitated, remembering the black substance on the previous door. "My flashlight's dead," I said. "I can't see if it's contaminated." "Use this," Tanaka said, pressing something into my hand, a leather glove. I pulled it on and pushed against the bar. The door swung open with surprising ease, revealing a well-lit corridor beyond. The sudden brightness was almost painful after the darkness of the passage. We stumbled through, finding ourselves in what appeared to be a medical wing. Unlike the rest of the facility, the power here was fully operational. Lights, equipment, everything running normally. "How is this possible?" Tanaka wondered, looking around at the pristine environment. "It wants us here," I realized suddenly. "It's herding us." Before Kapoor could respond, a figure in a white lab coat stepped out from one of the rooms, Dr. Wu, looking completely normal and unharmed. "There you are," he said, smiling with relief. "We've been searching everywhere for you. Quick, the secure communication center is this way." Tanaka started forward, but I grabbed his arm, remembering Rule 7. "Wu," I called out. "What about Amsterdam?" Wu's smile didn't falter. "Amsterdam was where we first realized what we were dealing with. Come, there's no time to waste." Still the wrong answer. I pulled Tanaka back. "That's not Wu." The smile on Wu's face widened, stretching beyond what should have been physically possible. His eyes darkened, black fluid leaking from the corners like tears. "Amsterdam is waiting for all of you," he said, his voice now overlaid with something ancient and malevolent. "The ship remembers your brother Vasquez. He was supposed to be our herald, but he broke too easily. You're stronger. You'll make a better vessel." More figures emerged from the surrounding rooms. Fisher, Rivera, and others I recognized from the facility staff, all smiling those two wide smiles, black fluid seeping from their eyes, nostrils, and ears. "Run," Kapoor whispered. "Down the hall. Don't stop for anything." We turned and sprinted away from the advancing figures, their movements unnaturally coordinated, like puppets controlled by a single mind. My watch showed 3:17 a.m. Nearly an hour left in the forbidden window. As we ran, the overhead speakers suddenly crackled to life. A voice, Decker's voice, came through, strained but determined. "This is a facility-wide alert," he announced. "Implement Rule 8. I repeat, Implement Rule 8. I exchanged confused glances with Kapoor and Tanaka as we ran. There was no Rule 8 in the journal. What the hell is Rule 8? Tanaka gasped as we sprinted down the corridor, the infected personnel in steady pursuit. I don't know, Kapoor admitted, but we need to find Decker. The corridor ahead split into 3 branches. No signs, no markings to indicate which way would lead us to safety. I glanced at my watch. 3:22 a.m. The forbidden time window stretched before us like an abyss. Left, I decided quickly, and count your steps. We veered left, our footsteps echoing loudly. The pursuing figures maintained their pace, neither speeding up nor slowing down. They moved with mechanical precision, as if conserving energy for a long chase. They knew we had nowhere to go. After 32 steps, the corridor ended at a set of double doors labelled Auxiliary Command Center. I pushed through, and we found ourselves in a dimly lit room filled with monitoring equipment and communication terminals. Most screens displayed static, but a few showed security camera feeds from around the facility. "Lock the doors," Kapoor instructed, rushing to the nearest terminal. Tanaka and I dragged a heavy metal cabinet in front of the entrance while Kapoor attempted to access the system. "It's asking for an authorization code," he said, frustration evident in his voice. On one of the active monitors, I spotted a familiar figure moving through what appeared to be the main control room. "There's Decker," I pointed to the screen. Kapoor grabbed a microphone connected to the facility's PA system. "Decker, it's Kapoor. We're in the Auxiliary Command Center. What's Rule 8? After a moment of static, Decker's voice came through a nearby speaker. "Kapoor, thank God, stay where you are. I'm coming to you." "What's Rule 8? Kapoor repeated urgently. A heavy thud against the barricaded doors made us all jump. The infected personnel had found us. "No time to explain," Decker responded. "Just don't let them touch you. And whatever happens, don't let them back to the ship between 4 and 4:13. That's when it's most vulnerable." The banging at the door intensified, the metal beginning to buckle under the pressure. "We're not going to last until Decker gets here," Tanaka said, his voice strained. I scanned the room desperately, looking for anything that might help us. My eyes fell on a small storage closet in the corner. "In there," I suggested. "It's small, but if we can barricade it..." Before we could move, the double doors burst open, the cabinet skidding across the floor. Fisher entered first, his body now so distorted that he barely resembled a human. His limbs had elongated, joints bending at impossible angles, skin glistening with that same black, oil-like substance. Behind him came Wu, Rivera, and 2 others I didn't recognize, all similarly transformed. "Amsterdam awaits," Fisher said, his voice a discordant chorus of multiple tones. "The ship calls to complete the cycle." Kapoor suddenly shoved a piece of paper into my hand. "Get to the ship," he whispered urgently. "It's the only way to stop this." Before I could respond, he lunged forward, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. "Run!" he shouted, unleashing a cloud of white chemical spray at the transformed personnel. They recoiled momentarily, giving Tanaka and me an opening. We sprinted past them into the corridor, their angry howls following us as we ran. "Which way?" Tanaka panted. I unfolded the paper Kapoor had given me, a rough map of the facility with a route marked in red, leading from our position to the hangar containing the archiver. "This way," I said, pulling him down the right-hand corridor. Behind us, inhuman shrieks echoed off the walls, followed by wet, slapping footsteps in pursuit. We ran, counting steps together to ensure the corridors weren't changing on us. The facility seemed to be deteriorating by the minute. Lights flickering more violently, walls developing cracks that leaked black fluid, floors becoming uneven and treacherous. After several turns and a harrowing journey down a stairwell where the steps kept changing number, we finally reached the entrance to the hangar. The massive doors were ajar, a faint blue glow emanating from within. My watch read 3:47 a.m. Less than 15 minutes until the critical 4 a.m. to 4:13 a.m. window Decker had mentioned. "We need to find a place to hide until then," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Whatever Decker meant about the ship being vulnerable, we need to be ready." We slipped through the doors into the cavernous hangar. What I saw inside made my blood freeze. The archiver was no longer the sleek, black vessel it had been. Its hull pulsated like a living heart, sections bulging and receding in a hypnotic rhythm. The black surface had developed intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as I watched, forming symbols that hurt my eyes. Around the ship, dozens of facility personnel stood in concentric circles, their bodies in various stages of transformation. Some merely had black veins spreading across their skin, while others had been twisted into nightmarish parodies of human form. All were completely motionless, as if in a trance, facing the ship with their arms outstretched. "Jesus Christ," Tanaka whispered. "It's like they're worshipping it." "We need to hide," I urged, pulling him toward a cluster of equipment crates at the edge of the hangar. As we crouched behind the crates, I examined the paper Kapoor had given me more closely. On the back was a hastily scrawled note. Rule 8. If all else fails, return the fragment to the void. The ship needs it to remain anchored in our dimension. 4 o'clock to 4:13 is the window when their connection is weakest. The fragment is in the cargo hold. You'll know it when you see it. The rules were never for our protection. They were to keep it stable until it could complete the transfer. It's been slowly moving from the ship to our world for 500 years. Your brother found another piece of it in that cave. They've been scattered across Earth for millennia, waiting to be rejoined. I'm sorry. I showed the note to Tanaka, whose face paled as he read it. So the ship isn't possessed by something, he realized. It is the something. The vessel and the entity are becoming one. And it's using these people to help it fully manifest in our dimension, I added. The original crew must have discovered this and tried to warn others with the rules they left behind. My thoughts turned to Miguel. The cave system he'd been exploring must have contained another fragment of this same entity, another piece of the Temple of Black Glass that had been scattered across Earth. No wonder the black residue matched what we found on the archiver. So what's the plan? Tanaka asked. I checked my watch again, 3:55 a.m. We wait until 4, then we get inside the ship, find that fragment, and, I don't know, throw it out an airlock. Decker said, turn it to the void. Tanaka nodded grimly. If we can interrupt whatever process is happening during that critical window. A soft sound behind us cut him off. We turned to find Dr. Tanaka standing there, a second Dr. Tanaka, identical to the man crouching beside me. Amsterdam is waiting, this new Tanaka said, his mouth stretching into that impossible smile. The real Tanaka beside me scrambled backward, his face a mask of horror as he stared at his doppelganger. How? He began, but never finished the sentence. The fake Tanaka moved with blinding speed, grabbing him by the throat. Where their skin touched, black veins immediately spread across the real Tanaka's neck and face. I lunged forward without thinking, trying to break the creature's grip on Tanaka. As my hands made contact with its cold, slick skin, an electric jolt of pain shot up my arms. Images flooded my mind. Stars seen from impossible angles, vast structures of black glass floating in the void between worlds, and a hunger so ancient and all-consuming it defied comprehension. Somehow I managed to pull the thing off Tanaka, who collapsed to the floor gasping, black veins still spreading across his skin. His eyes met mine, filled with terror and resignation. Go, he choked out. Finish this. The doppelganger recovered quickly, head rotating unnaturally to focus on me. Behind it, I noticed movement among the circles of transformed personnel. They were beginning to stir, awareness returning to their distorted forms. My watch beeped, 4 a.m. exactly. With one last desperate look at Tanaka, I turned and sprinted toward the archiver. The ship's pulsations had increased in speed, the hull now rippling violently. A gaping opening had appeared in its side, not a proper airlock or door, but a ragged tear in the fabric of the vessel itself, revealing a pulsing blue light within. Behind me, the gathered personnel began to move, their movements jerky and uncoordinated at first, then smoothing into an eerie synchronicity. They weren't chasing me. They were forming a tighter circle around the ship, creating a barrier. I pushed through them, dodging grasping hands and elongated limbs. One caught my jacket, tearing it from my back as I broke free and leaped through the opening in the ship's hull. Inside, the archiver bore little resemblance to the spacecraft we had initially discovered. The walls, floor, and ceiling had merged into a continuous organic surface that pulsed with the same rhythm as the exterior. Veins of blue light ran through the black material, converging toward the center of the ship. The air was thick with a metallic taste that coated my tongue and made my eyes water. I struggled to orient myself, trying to remember the ship's layout from the schematics I'd studied. The cargo hold should be toward the rear, but the interior had been so transformed that it was nearly impossible to recognize. Following the pulsing veins of light seemed my best option. They grew brighter and more numerous as I moved deeper into the ship, eventually leading me to what must have been the cargo hold, now a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline structure in its center. The fragment from the Temple of Black Glass had grown, absorbing parts of the ship and reforming them into a miniature version of whatever ancient structure it had once belonged to. At its core glowed an intense blue light, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the ship around it. As I approached, I felt a pressure building in my head, voices whispering in languages no human throat could produce. Images flashed through my mind, Earth seen from orbit, then transforming, its blue oceans turning black, its continents reshaped by vast structures of gleaming obsidian, billions of humans, their bodies and minds remade into vessels for the entity's consciousness. I checked my watch, 4:07 a.m. 6 minutes left in the vulnerability window. The fragment sat on what remained of its pedestal, now partially merged with it. How was I supposed to return it to the void? The ship had no functional airlocks anymore, no way to jettison it into space. Then I noticed something on the floor nearby, a small, handheld device I recognized from the equipment logs. An emergency beacon, designed to be ejected from the ship in case of catastrophic failure. It was meant to contain a message, but it could just as easily hold the fragment. As I moved toward it, a voice spoke behind me. Miguel never understood what he found. But you do, don't you, brother? I turned to see Miguel standing there, not the Miguel from the hospital video, raving and terrified, but my brother as he had been before, strong and confident. Only his eyes betrayed him, black and depthless as the void. You're not my brother, I said, backing toward the beacon. I have his memories, the thing wearing Miguel's face said, his thoughts, his love for you. In a way, I am more your brother than he was at the end, broken and afraid. What are you? I demanded, trying to buy time as I edged closer to the beacon. The false Miguel smiled. I am old. Before your sun burned, before your planet cooled, I traveled between the stars. I have had many names in many worlds. On Earth, some called me God, others demon. I am neither. I simply am. And the ship. The crew? The ship found one of my fragments, adrift for eons after my form was scattered by enemies long turned to dust. The crew proved useful vessels, allowing me to begin my reconstitution. But the process is slow. 5 centuries to prepare for this moment, when the stars align and I can fully manifest. Why the rules? I asked, my hand closing around the beacon behind my back. The thing wearing my brother's face laughed, a hollow sound that echoed strangely in the chamber. The rules were meant to maintain stability during my reformation. The original crew discovered them through trial and error, learning what actions disrupted my connection to this dimension. They thought they were protecting themselves, never realizing they were merely preserving me until the proper time. It took a step closer. Amsterdam was where I first touched human minds, centuries before the archiver was built. They never reached it physically, but their dreams did. That's how I guided them to find my fragment in deep space. My watch showed 4:11 a.m., 2 minutes left. Your brother's expedition found another piece of me, it continued. Had he been stronger, he would have brought it here, joining it with this fragment. Instead, he broke. But now you're here, at the perfect moment. In one fluid motion, I grabbed the fragment and shoved it into the beacon. The thing wearing Miguel's face shrieked, lunging toward me with inhuman speed. I slammed my hand on the beacon's emergency launch button as its fingers closed around my throat. Pain exploded through me as black veins spread rapidly from its touch. My vision blurred, filled with impossible geometries and ancient stars. I heard the beacon's motor engage, felt the vibration as it prepared to launch. The creature's grip tightened, its features melting and reforming, cycling through faces I recognized: Miguel, Fisher, Wu, Tanaka, before settling on a visage that was alien and terrifying in its perfect symmetry. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it hissed, its voice a cacophony of every human it had absorbed. The beacon launched with a pneumatic hiss, shooting through a small port that opened in the ship's hull. The effect was instantaneous. The blue light dimmed, and the pulsing rhythm faltered. The creature screamed, its grip loosening as its form began to destabilize. My watch beeped. 4:13 a.m. The window was closing. The ship around us shuddered violently, the organic material of its walls beginning to crack and flake away. The creature backed away from me, its body convulsing as it struggled to maintain cohesion. "What have you done?" it demanded, its voice fracturing into dozens of separate human voices crying out in unison. "Returned the fragment to the void," I managed to say, feeling the black veins receding from my skin. "Like Rule 8 said." Its face contorted with rage and something else, fear. "This changes nothing. I have waited eons. I will wait eons more. There are other fragments, other vessels." The ship gave a final violent shudder and the creature dissolved into a swirling mass of black particles that scattered throughout the chamber before dissipating entirely. As the archiver began to collapse around me, I stumbled toward where the hull breach had been, hoping it still led outside. The organic material that had consumed the ship was rapidly decaying, falling away to reveal the original structure beneath, ancient but recognizable. I found the opening and jumped through just as the ship began to implode, the material of its hull folding in on itself like paper being crushed by an invisible hand. The transformed personnel in the hangar were collapsing as well, the black substance leaving their bodies in tendrils of dark smoke that faded into nothingness. Some lay motionless on the floor, while others staggered about in confusion, returned to human form, but disoriented and terrified. As the archiver continued its implosion, I spotted Decker across the hangar supporting an injured but very much alive Kapoor. They gestured frantically for me to run. I sprinted toward them as the ship collapsed completely, creating a vacuum that pulled at us with hurricane force. We barely made it through the hangar doors before they automatically sealed shut, cutting off the howling wind. "The fragment," Decker demanded when I reached them. "Ejected," I gasped. "Where will it go?" "The beacon was programmed to head directly for the sun," Kapoor explained, wincing from his injuries. "If what we understand about this entity is correct, the solar radiation should destroy it completely." "And the ship?" Decker's expression was grim. "First priority is containment and survivor assessment. Then we sanitize the entire facility." As if to punctuate his statement, the lights overhead flickered, then stabilized. "What about the other fragments?" I asked, remembering the creature's final words. "It said there were others." "One problem at a time," Decker replied, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "For now, we've stopped it from fully manifesting. That's what matters." I nodded, exhausted beyond words. As we limped toward the medical wing to check for survivors, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The creature had waited 500 years for this opportunity. It could wait 500 more. And somewhere out there, more fragments remained, patient and hidden, waiting to be found. The aftermath was a nightmare of bureaucracy and psychological evaluation. For 3 days, those of us who had survived were quarantined in what remained of the facility's medical wing. Government officials in hazmat suits came and went, asking the same questions over and over until our voices grew hoarse from repetition. "Describe the entity again." "What exactly did you see inside the ship?" "When did the symptoms first manifest in affected personnel?" They never seemed satisfied with our answers, as if they were waiting for some detail we hadn't provided. I couldn't shake the suspicion that they already knew more than they were letting on. Of the 147 people originally stationed at the facility, only 43 survived. Some, like Tanaka, had been partially transformed but returned to normal after the fragment was ejected. Others had been completely overtaken, their bodies so twisted by the entity's influence that they couldn't survive its removal. And some, like Rivera, had been dead from the beginning. Dr. Kapoor was among the lucky ones. Whatever injuries he had sustained while creating a diversion for us had been relatively minor. When I finally got to speak with him privately, his first question surprised me. "The journal," he said, his voice low to avoid being overheard by the guards posted outside our recovery room. "Did you read all of it, Captain Marquez's journal?" I shook my head. "Just the rules and the final entry." "Why?" Kapoor glanced nervously at the door. "Because I think there was more to it than we were shown. Pages had been removed. I saw the binding, threads where additional sheets should have been. You think someone tampered with it? Removed information? I think," he said carefully, "that we might not be the first to encounter this entity. The journal was too convenient, the rules too specific." The thought had crossed my mind as well. The timing of the ship's return after exactly 500 years seemed too precise to be coincidence. "Decker knows more than he's saying," I suggested. Kapoor nodded slightly. The DoD involvement was immediate, almost as if they were expecting it. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new figure, a woman in a crisp black suit, her badge identifying her as Dr. Eloise Winters, Department of Special Containment. "Mr. Vasquez," she said, her tone clipped and professional, "you're being transferred." "Transferred where?" I demanded. "A specialized facility for debriefing and observation. Dr. Kapoor will be joining you shortly." I looked to Kapoor, who seemed equally confused. "What about the others? Tanaka? Decker?" "All in due time," she replied dismissively. "Now please come with me." I had little choice but to follow. 2 armed guards escorted us down corridors I hadn't seen before, leading to a helipad on the roof of the facility. A sleek black helicopter waited, its rotors already spinning. As we approached, Dr. Winters handed me a tablet. "I've been authorized to show you this. It should answer some of your questions." The screen displayed a classified document dated 1968, detailing an expedition to the Valles Caldera in New Mexico, the same location where Miguel had his encounter. According to the report, a crystalline artifact of extraterrestrial origin had been discovered but left in place due to unusual properties that resisted containment. "You knew," I said, looking up from the tablet. "The government knew about these fragments all along." "Not exactly," Dr. Winters replied as we boarded the helicopter. "We knew something was there, but not what it was. Your brother's expedition wasn't the first to encounter the Valles Caldera fragment, but it was the first to activate it." The helicopter lifted off, the facility shrinking beneath us. I noticed the black stain spreading across the roof where the hangar had been. Containment protocols had failed to completely eliminate the entity's influence. "And the archiver?" I asked, raising my voice over the rotor noise. "You knew it was coming back." Dr. Winters handed me a set of noise-cancelling headphones, waiting until I put them on before responding. Her voice came through clearly over the integrated communication system. In 1952, radio astronomers detected a signal originating from deep space. It took years to decode, but eventually we realized it was a transmission from the archiver. Not from the crew, but from what had taken control of the ship. It announced its impending return. "You had 70 years to prepare," I said, anger building in my chest. "And you still lost over 100 people." "We didn't understand what we were dealing with," she admitted. "The signal contained data we've been studying for decades, but much of it remains indecipherable. What we did understand was that the entity was collecting." "Collecting what?" "Fragments of itself, scattered across various worlds. Earth apparently contains several pieces. The Valles Caldera fragment was one. There are others." My mind raced back to what the entity had said in Miguel's voice. "There are other fragments, other vessels." "How many?" I demanded. "How many fragments are on Earth?" Dr. Winters hesitated. "That's classified." "Bullshit," I snapped. "My brother died because of this thing. I nearly died. I deserve to know what we're dealing with." She studied me for a moment, then sighed. 7. Based on the data from the transmission and cross-referencing with various archaeological anomalies, we believe there are 7 fragments on Earth. Now 6 after the one from the ship was destroyed, and the Valles Caldera fragment. Contained. After your brother's incident, a special team recovered it. It's currently in a secure facility. The helicopter banked sharply, heading east. Below us stretched the New Mexico desert, red and gold in the late afternoon sun. In the distance, I could make out a military installation surrounded by high fences and watchtowers. "Is that where we're going?" I asked. Dr. Winters shook her head. "Number. That's where the Valles Caldera fragment is being held. We're taking you somewhere else." A thought struck me. The rules. If you've known about this entity for decades, you must have known about the rules too. "Some of them," she confirmed. "Different fragments seem to have different requirements for interaction. The rules your brother discovered were similar but not identical to those from the archiver. Each fragment appears to establish its own specific protocols." "They're not for protection," I said, remembering what the entity had told me. "They're for stability. To maintain the entity's connection to our dimension until it can fully manifest." Dr. Winters looked surprised. "That's not the conclusion our researchers reached. The working theory was that the rules were a form of psychological warfare, designed to create specific neural patterns in human minds that made them more susceptible to influence." "It lied to you," I said simply. "It wanted you to keep following the rules, to keep it stable until the alignment it mentioned. When the stars align, it said, that's when it could fully manifest." Her expression grew troubled. "If that's true, then our containment protocols for the other fragments might be exactly what it wants," I finished for her. The helicopter began to descend toward another facility, this one nestled in a remote mountain valley. Unlike the military installation we'd passed, this complex appeared more scientific in nature, large domed buildings and satellite arrays scattered across the landscape. "Where are we?" I asked as we touched down on a landing pad. "Sandia Mountain Research Station," Dr. Winters replied. "Officially, it's a high-energy physics laboratory. Unofficially, it's where we study the transmission from the archiver and coordinate our response to the entity." As we disembarked, I was struck by the activity level. Dozens of personnel rushing between buildings, equipment being loaded onto trucks. A general air of urgency that suggested something beyond standard operations. "What's happening?" I asked, following Dr. Winters toward the main complex. "After what happened at the Johnson Space Center, protocols have changed. We're dispersing our research to multiple facilities, minimizing risk." Inside, the complex was a maze of laboratories and offices. Dr. Winters led me to a conference room where several people waited, including Decker and, to my surprise, Tanaka. They both looked exhausted but otherwise recovered from their ordeal. "Vasquez," Decker acknowledged with a nod. "Glad you made it." "What's this about?" I asked, taking a seat at the table. "We have a situation," Dr. Winters explained, activating a wall screen. It displayed a map of the world with 7 points marked in red. One was crossed out, presumably the fragment from the archiver that had been destroyed. Another was circled, the Valles Caldera fragment now in containment. "The remaining 5 fragments," she continued, "have begun exhibiting increased activity. Energy signatures, radiation patterns, everything is spiking. It started exactly when the archiver fragment was ejected. They're responding," Tanaka realized, "communicating somehow." Decker nodded grimly. "And that's not all. We've been monitoring deep space communications. There's a signal coming from where the emergency beacon was headed, redirected away from the sun. The fragment wasn't destroyed." My blood ran cold. "Then where is it?" "It's moving back toward Earth," Dr. Winters said quietly. "And it's not alone. Something's coming with it." The implications hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't stopped anything. We just alerted the rest of the entity's fragments that one of their own was returning. How long do we have? I asked. At current velocity, 4 days, Decker replied. Maybe less if it accelerates. What's the plan? Dr. Winters exchanged glances with Decker before responding. That's why you're here. You and your brother both encountered fragments and survived with your minds intact. You successfully ejected the fragment from the archiver, even if it didn't go as planned. We need your insight. Into what? Into the entity's psychology, if you can call it that, Decker explained. It communicated with you directly. It took your brother's form. What did you sense about its motivations, its weaknesses? I considered the question carefully. It's ancient, patient. The time span of centuries means nothing to it. But it's also fragmented, in more ways than one. It has a collective consciousness, but the pieces have been separated for so long that they've developed, individual characteristics. Like multiple personalities, Tanaka suggested. Something like that. The fragment I encountered had absorbed the memories and personalities of the archiver's crew and later the facility personnel. It used those to communicate, to understand us. But underneath all that was something older, something that thought very differently from humans. Dr. Winters nodded, making notes on her tablet. What about weaknesses? Vulnerabilities? The time window, 4 a.m. to 4:13 a.m. It said that's when its connection to our dimension is weakest, and it needs the fragments to anchor itself here. Without them, it can't fully manifest. So if we could somehow neutralize all the fragments simultaneously, Decker began. Maybe, I said, unconvinced. But even one is incredibly powerful. 5 working in concert, plus the one returning from space? I'm not sure conventional containment would work. We're beyond conventional anything at this point, Dr. Winters said grimly. Which is why I've been authorized to show you this. She entered a code on her tablet and a section of the wall slid away, revealing a heavily secured vault door beyond. After another series of security measures, the vault opened to reveal a simple pedestal at its center. On it sat a small black fragment similar to the one I'd seen in the archiver, but with subtle differences in its crystalline structure. This isn't the Valles caldera fragment, I realized immediately. This is a different one. Recovered in Antarctica in 1983, Dr. Winters confirmed. We've been studying it ever since, trying to understand its properties. Unlike the others, this one seems dormant, unresponsive to stimuli. I approached cautiously, feeling a familiar pressure building in my head as I neared the fragment. But unlike with the one on the ship, there were no whispers, no visions of alien stars. This piece felt incomplete somehow. Empty. It's dead, I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. Or whatever passes for death with these things. It's like a shell. Dr. Winters looked startled. Our researchers have theorized something similar, but we've never been able to confirm it. How can you tell? I stared at the fragment, memories of my encounter with the entity flooding back. Because I felt its mind. On the ship, this doesn't have that same presence. It's like a burnt-out circuit. If this one is dead, Tanaka said slowly, maybe there's a way to neutralize the others too. Not just contain them, but render them inert. Decker's expression hardened. That's exactly what we're hoping to find out. And we have 4 days to do it before the fragment returns with whatever it's bringing from deep space. I glanced at my watch, an old habit from following the rules. 3:58 a.m. The forbidden time window was approaching, even though we were far from the archiver now. As if reading my thoughts, Dr. Winters spoke. Don't worry. This facility follows all containment protocols. No one enters any research area between 3 a.m. and 4:13 a.m. Just a precaution. But as the minute hand ticked over to 3:59, the lights in the vault flickered briefly. The dormant fragment on the pedestal remained unchanged, but for just a moment I could have sworn I saw something move across its surface. A ripple, like a stone disturbing still water. Did you see that? I asked, backing away from the pedestal. Before anyone could respond, an alarm began to blare throughout the facility. Proximity alert, Decker said, checking his tablet. "Something just breached our perimeter." The vault door slammed shut automatically, sealing us inside with the fragment. On Dr. Winter's tablet, security camera feeds showed chaos erupting throughout the complex, personnel running, emergency protocols being implemented, and at the main entrance, a familiar figure walking calmly through the panic. My brother Miguel, exactly as I remembered him before his expedition. His movements were perfectly human, his expression neutral as he navigated the facility with confident familiarity. But his eyes, even on the small screen, were unmistakably wrong, black and fathomless. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Miguel is dead." "That's not your brother," Decker said grimly, drawing his sidearm. "That's what we've been afraid of. The fragments aren't just communicating, they're mobilizing." My watch beeped softly. 4 a.m. The vulnerability window had begun. The air in the vault grew heavy, like trying to breathe underwater. On Dr. Winter's tablet, we watched as Miguel made his way through the facility with casual efficiency, security personnel collapsing in his wake, black veins spreading across their skin where he touched them. "He's heading for the vault," Decker said, his voice tight. "For this fragment." "He knows I'm here," I realized. "It's using Miguel's memories, his connection to me." Dr. Winters turned to a control panel on the wall, entering a series of codes. This vault was designed to contain anomalous energy signatures. Nothing gets in or out without proper authorization. "You think that'll stop it?" I asked incredulously. "After what we saw at Johnson?" "The containment systems here are different," she insisted, "based on what we learned from the dormant fragment, specifically designed to—" A deep, resonant tone interrupted her, vibrating through the metal of the vault. The security feeds on her tablet flickered, then stabilized to show Miguel standing outside the vault door, one hand pressed against the metal surface. His lips moved, forming words we couldn't hear. "What's he saying?" Tanaka asked, leaning closer to the screen. I didn't need audio to recognize the pattern of my brother's speech. "He's counting," I said, a chill running down my spine. "Trying to determine if the distance is changing. Rule 6, double quote." The dormant fragment on the pedestal began to vibrate, a low hum emanating from its crystalline structure. Tiny fractures appeared on its surface, black fluid seeping through like blood from a wound. "It's activating," Dr. Winters said, backing away from the pedestal. "How is that possible?" "It's been inert for decades." "The time window," I reminded them, 4 a.m. to 4:13 a.m. That's when the connection is weakest, but it's also when the fragments can communicate directly. On the tablet, Miguel had been joined by others, transformed personnel moving with that same eerie synchronicity we'd seen at Johnson. They formed a semicircle around the vault door, each placing a hand against the metal. The door began to bulge inward, the reinforced steel warping as if made of soft clay. "We need to destroy this fragment before they get in," Decker declared, raising his weapon. "No!" Dr. Winters leaped forward, placing herself between Decker and the pedestal. "Destroying it could release its energy. We don't know what would happen." "We don't have a choice," he argued. "If all the fragments reunite—" The argument was cut short by a mechanical whirring. Part of the vault floor began to separate, revealing a circular platform ascending from below. On it stood a familiar figure, Dr. Wu, his face expressionless, black veins visible beneath his skin. "Amsterdam awaits us all," he said, his voice carrying that same multi-toned quality I remembered from the ship. Decker fired without hesitation, the gunshots deafeningly loud in the confined space. The bullet struck Wu in the chest, but instead of blood, black viscous fluid erupted from the wounds. Wu barely reacted, continuing his advance toward the pedestal. "The fragment must join with the others," he said, each word precisely articulated. "The alignment approaches." "What alignment?" I demanded, trying to buy time as Tanaka and Dr. Winters edged toward an emergency exit at the back of the vault. Wu's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "The convergence of dimensions. Once every 50,000 years the barriers thin. With all fragments united we can fully manifest." His gaze shifted to the fragment on the pedestal. "This one requires revival. It has slept too long." The vault door gave a final groan before tearing open. Miguel stepped through, followed by the transformed personnel. Their movements were eerily coordinated, like parts of a single organism. "Hello, brother," he said, voice exactly like Miguel's but undercut with something ancient and cold. "You've led us to what we seek. Again." "Again?" I echoed, confused. A smile spread across his face, too wide, too knowing. "Why do you think your brother found the fragment in Valles Caldera? Why do you think you were called to investigate the archiver? You've been our herald for centuries, life after life." "That's bullshit," I spat, though uncertainty gnawed at me. The strange familiarity I'd felt with the rules, the ease with which I'd understood the entity's nature. Miguel approached, the others hanging back. "Your blood carries the memory, passed down through generations. Your ancestors were there when I first came to this world, when my temple was destroyed and my essence scattered. They've served as my waypoints ever since, unconsciously drawn to my fragments." My mind raced through family history. Miguel's obsession with the Valles Caldera, my grandfather's unexplained disappearance in Antarctica in the 1980s, stories of an ancestor who sailed with Columbus but vanished exploring an ancient structure in the New World. "The Vasquez bloodline," Dr. Winters whispered, realization dawning on her face. "That's why you and your brother both survived contact. Your DNA is somehow compatible." "Precisely," Miguel confirmed. "They carry traces of my essence, diluted through generations. It protects them, guides them, brings them to me when needed." He extended a hand toward me. "Join with us willingly, brother. It's your birthright, your purpose." The dormant fragment pulsed more strongly now, cracks spreading across its surface. Wu had reached it and placed both hands on the crystalline structure, black fluid from his wounds flowing onto the fragment, seeping into the cracks. My watch showed 4:09 a.m., 4 minutes remaining in the vulnerability window. I caught Decker's eye, then glanced meaningfully at the ceiling sprinkler system. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "What happens when all fragments unite?" I asked, stepping closer to Miguel to hold his attention. "What do you become?" Pride radiated from his expression. "What I once was, a god among the stars. This world will be my vessel, its inhabitants my voice. I will remake it in the image of my home. And humanity, elevated. Those with compatible genetics will become extensions of my consciousness. The rest will serve other purposes." While he spoke, I noticed Decker slowly positioning himself beneath a sprinkler head. Dr. Winters and Tanaka had reached the emergency exit but remained still, waiting. "What about the other fragment?" I pressed. "The one returning from space?" Miguel smiled again. "Not returning, arriving. What you sent into the void called to others of my kind. They come now to witness my rebirth." The implications hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't just failed to destroy the fragment. We'd sent out a beacon, a signal to other entities like this one. "Now," I said loudly. Decker fired at the sprinkler above him. Water cascaded down, drenching everything in the vault. The transformed personnel recoiled, their skin sizzling where the water touched. But Miguel remained unmoved. "Water cannot harm me," he said dismissively. "It's not water," Dr. Winters called out. "It's a specialized containment solution, designed specifically to disrupt your energy patterns." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Miguel's face. The black veins beneath his skin began to pulse erratically, and his movements became less fluid. Wu screamed, a sound that contained multitudes of voices in agony. The dormant fragment beneath his hands was rejecting the black fluid, pushing it back out through the cracks. The fragment remembers death, I realized aloud. That's why it's been dormant. It experienced true death somehow, and it's resistant to reactivation. "Impossible," Miguel snarled, his voice losing its human quality, becoming a discordant chorus. "My essence cannot die." "Apparently it can," Decker said, continuing to fire at sprinkler heads, increasing the downpour of the containment solution. The transformed personnel began to convulse. black fluid leaking from their eyes, nostrils, and ears. Some collapsed, while others fled back through the ruined vault door. Miguel remained standing, though his form rippled like a heat mirage, struggling to maintain cohesion. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "The others come. The alignment approaches. This world will be reborn." My watch beeped. 4:13 a.m. The vulnerability window closed. The effect was immediate. The dormant fragment stopped pulsing, the cracks in its surface sealing themselves. Wu collapsed beside the pedestal, the black veins receding from his skin. Throughout the facility, the containment solution continued to rain down, washing away the entity's influence. But Miguel remained, his form solidifying again as the vulnerability window passed. His smile returned, confident and cruel. "Did you think it would be so simple?" he asked. "That your primitive understanding of time would save you? The window exists because I allow it to exist, a necessary fluctuation during my reformation." He stepped closer, unaffected by the containment solution. "But now, with 5 fragments active and synchronized, I have enough power to stabilize my presence. The window is closing. Permanently." Dr. Winters's tablet chimed with an incoming message. Her face paled as she read it. "The other facilities, all the fragments are fully active now. Containment has failed across the board." Miguel nodded in satisfaction. "My time of vulnerability is ending. Soon I will be beyond your reach entirely." A tremor ran through the facility, the floor shaking beneath our feet. Warning alarms blared throughout the complex. "What's happening?" Tanaka shouted over the noise. Dr. Winters checked her tablet again. "Massive energy surge from all fragments. They're creating some kind of spatial distortion." "The beginning of transformation," Miguel explained calmly, despite the chaos around us. "The fragments are aligning, creating a template for my full manifestation." Another, stronger tremor shook the vault, knocking equipment from shelves and sending us staggering. Through the ruined door, I could see the corridor beyond beginning to warp, the walls bending and twisting like reflections in a funhouse mirror. "We need to leave now," Decker shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the emergency exit where Tanaka and Dr. Winters waited. Miguel made no move to stop us. "Run if you wish. There is nowhere on this earth that will remain untouched." As we fled through the emergency exit and into a narrow escape tunnel, I glanced back one last time. Miguel stood among the falling water, his form growing less human by the second, his body elongated, limbs stretching and multiplying, skin becoming translucent to reveal a complex structure of black crystalline material beneath. The tunnel led us to an underground garage where several military vehicles waited. We piled into the nearest one, Decker taking the wheel and speeding up a ramp that opened onto a mountain road. Behind us, the research facility was transforming. Black crystalline structures erupted from the ground and buildings, reaching toward the night sky like grasping fingers. The mountain itself seemed to be reshaping, rock flowing like liquid to form new, impossible geometries. "Where are we going?" I asked as Decker navigated the winding road at dangerous speed. "Secondary containment site," Dr. Winters replied, her voice shaking. 50 miles north, it was established as a fallback position in case of catastrophic containment failure. "Will it make any difference?" Tanaka asked the question we were all thinking. Dr. Winters' silence was answer enough. As we crested a ridge and the transformed facility disappeared from view, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Impossible. All communications had been cut during the quarantine. I pulled it out to find a single text message from an unknown number. "Amsterdam is waiting. So is Miguel. The real Miguel. Find us in the void between stars." The message was accompanied by a set of coordinates, not on Earth, but in deep space, where the fragment had been sent, where something was now returning. I showed the message to the others, my hand trembling. "It's toying with us," Decker said dismissively. "Your brother is dead." "Maybe," I admitted. "But what if he isn't? What if his consciousness was somehow preserved when he encountered the fragment in Valles Caldera?" "Even if that were possible," Dr. Winters argued, "how would we reach those coordinates? We're talking about deep space travel." A memory surfaced. The archiver, not as the corrupted vessel it had become, but as it was originally built. A ship designed to traverse the stars. "There's one way," I said quietly. "The original archiver plans must still exist in some archive. If we could build another ship—" "You're talking about a suicide mission," Tanaka interrupted. "Even if we could build a ship, even if we could reach those coordinates, what would we find? Another trap?" "Maybe," I conceded. "But it's also the only lead we have on the entity's origins, on how to stop it." As we drove through the night, the sky above began to change. Stars shifted position, new constellations forming in impossible arrangements. The moon's light took on an oily, prismatic quality, casting rainbows that seemed to cut through the air itself. The world was being reshaped, just as Miguel had promised, and we had less than 4 days before whatever was returning from deep space arrived to complete the transformation. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "Time is a circle. The archiver returns because it always returns. You will build it because you always build it. Find me in Amsterdam." I stared at the message, a terrible understanding dawning. The archiver hadn't just returned after 500 years. It had completed a loop we were about to initiate again. "We need to go to Amsterdam," I said, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. "Why?" Decker demanded. "Because that's where it started. That's where we'll find the answers." I turned to face them all. "And because that's where we'll build the ship that becomes the archiver." Amsterdam, 4 months later. The workshop smelled of hot metal and ozone. I wiped sweat from my brow as I studied the blueprints spread across the table, designs that had come to me in dreams night after night since we arrived in this ancient city. Designs for a ship that could traverse the stars. Outside, the world continued its transformation. The skies had turned permanently strange, stars visible even during daylight, their patterns shifting hourly. Black crystalline structures now erupted from the earth across the globe, reshaping landscapes into alien geometries. Most governments had collapsed in the chaos, and the remnants of organized society clustered around the few areas that remained relatively untouched. Amsterdam was one such place, protected somehow. Within a 10-mile radius of the city centre, the transformation progressed more slowly. We had maybe 6 months before it caught up to us. 6 months to complete the impossible. "The propulsion system calculations check out," Tanaka said, entering the workshop with a stack of papers. He looked older now, grey streaking his hair, eyes perpetually shadowed from lack of sleep. "If your designs are correct, the ship could theoretically reach the coordinates." "They'll work," I said with a certainty I couldn't explain. The knowledge flowed through me like memories of things I hadn't experienced yet, or perhaps had experienced in a different cycle of time. Dr. Winters joined us, reviewing our progress. After the failure at Sandia, she had abandoned protocol and official channels, throwing in her lot with our desperate plan. "The components from Geneva arrived this morning," she reported. "We're on schedule for a launch in 3 weeks." I nodded, turning to the window. In the distance, I could see the ship taking shape in what had once been a soccer stadium, now converted to a makeshift shipyard. Its sleek black hull caught the strange light from above, reflecting it in ways that hurt the eyes if you looked too long. We were calling it the Pilgrim, though I knew that someday, centuries from now, it would return to Earth with a different name. "Do you really think he's out there?" Tanaka asked quietly. "Your brother?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But something is. Something that knows how to stop this." My phone had gone silent after that night, no more mysterious messages. But the dreams continued, visions of stars seen from impossible angles, vast structures of black glass floating in the void, and always at the center of it all a figure waiting. Sometimes it wore Miguel's face, sometimes something else entirely. Decker entered, his uniform abandoned for practical work clothes stained with engine grease. "We've got company," he said grimly, gesturing toward the door. A man stood there, his face hauntingly familiar despite the centuries that separated us. Captain Alfonso Marquez, exactly as depicted in historical accounts of the original Archiver mission. "It's time we talked about the rules," he said, his voice carrying the same multi-toned quality as the entity's other vessels. Instead of fear, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Which ones?" I asked. "The ones for the ship, or the ones for the ritual in 1524 that starts this whole cycle?" His smile was knowing, ancient. "Both. You'll need them when you reach the temple in the void, when you meet what waits there." "And what happens then?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Then," he replied, "you'll understand why some cycles must be broken, even if it means destroying everything." He handed me a small leather-bound journal, the same one we'd found on the archiver months ago. Its pages were blank except for the first entry, waiting to be filled with rules that would guide a crew 5 centuries from now. As I took it, my fingers brushed against his. No black veins spread across my skin, no visions assaulted my mind. Whatever connection my bloodline had to the entity seemed to protect me from its direct influence. "Amsterdam was only the beginning," he said cryptically. "The void between stars will be the end." Outside, the sky darkened as something massive began to eclipse the sun, not a cloud or natural phenomenon, but a vast shape descending from orbit. The fragment returning from deep space had arrived early, and it had grown. The final stage was beginning. Our time had run out, and somewhere in the darkness above, Miguel was waiting.